Hello there, welcome to another episode of the Valkyria Chronicles with Ungainly Titan, and in this case, after the success at Vassal, 3rd Regiment of the Militia has been sent south into the Kloden Wood. They believe that the Imperials are supplying their forces in the central region of Gallia through a supply depot in the Kloden Wood. And while the militia and 3rd Regiment are planning their assault, the Imperial High Command is actually meeting and discussing the very problem of the supply depot in the Kloden Wood. One of the consequences of the whole thing is that the Emperor of the Imperials, Maximilian, rearranges his command staff and he sends General Jaeger down here to secure the Kloden Wood supply base. 7th Squad is lost in the woods, but they manage to find a path through the wood, through the forest, an animal trail that takes them to the enemy supply base, and this is the battle is kicks off. Now I'm running the battle at 1.5 speed, and I've not included the deployment phase where I selected units. The biggest problem I had actually with the unit, this battle did convince me that I didn't have enough engineers on the roster. I had originally only 2 engineers in the squad. I think I had 2 engineers, 3 snipers, 3 lancers, and the rest were divided between scouts and shock troops. But I think 2 extra shock troops than scouts. I think I had slightly more shock troops than scouts. And it says in the thing that in the sort of instructions in the game that shock troops are the most versatile troops you've got. Well, they are and they aren't. They are pretty good in attack and defense. They're quite strong for both attack and defense. They got a good few hit points. They're reasonably well armored, and their offensive firepower is pretty effective. Although it's a shorter range, as far as I can tell, than compared to scouts. But they're slow. 2 command points spent moving a shock trooper will probably only move it slightly further than a scout on 1 command point. And command points really are your limiting resource in this game. It's my experience that you're more likely to spend but command points are the limiting resource, and one of the reasons that I finish up deploying my all of my lancers on a lot of the missions. Now, Cherry survived the mine there, but quite frequently a unit that steps in a mine won't survive it. So I am bringing up Dallas, because both Dallas can sweep mines, and Dallas can give Cherry a healing boost and doesn't run out. One of the advantages of having engineers, and one of the reasons why I find the demand for engineers is quite high in my unit, in my combats, and the way I run the combats, is that every unit has certain types of ammunition or supplies that are limited. So, for instance, with the exception of engineers, everybody's only got a single hand grenade and single use of a Ragnite healing potion. And if you're a lancer, you've only got 3 rounds of ammunition for your lance, your anti-tank lance. If you're a sniper, you've only got 3 rounds of ammunition for your sniper rifle. So in a given phase, you can activate a sniper 3 times and they're out of ammo. If you want to activate a sniper subsequently, you've got to run an engineer up to them and supply them. The thing, though, is that an engineer can effectively supply as many units as they can run up close enough to trigger the supply effect, whereas the other engineering specialised tasks like repairing and shooting and stuff like that can only be done once. Another thing that the engineer can do multiple times is disarm mines, because once they get close enough to the mine, they get the option of disarming the mine, and they can do that as many times as they have the action points to walk near enough to the mine. The trick is not to get them so close that you're blown up. So what I find frequently happens in regular combat is that the engineers are supplying specialised units, particularly the lancers, with ammunition, or the snipers. And the other thing they're doing is keeping the Edelweiss in good repair, because generally in all the scenarios I've played so far, if you lose the Edelweiss or Vulcan dies, which usually means the same thing. If you lose the tank on your unit, you've lost the battle. And the tank, you can't avoid getting hit. So 3 rounds of, well, maybe 3 to 4 rounds of anti-tank fire could take out the tank. About 4 to 5 rounds of Lancer fire direct could take it out. Now 2 rounds into the radiator from the back, or even 1 round into the radiator, could actually take out a tank. I don't think 1 round would take it out from full health, but if it had taken a hit before, a single good shot into the glowing radiator at the back of the tank could actually take out a tank. Now I don't know if it will work with the Edelweiss, but it certainly works with enemy tanks. The other thing I have found in the course of playing this game is that Lancer units are more, how would I say, cost effective. They're command point effective way of taking out enemy tanks than using the tank. Every time I activate the Edelweiss, it costs 2 command points. The Edelweiss's movement is fairly limited, and generally a shot from the Edelweiss does about quarter damage to an enemy light tank. So it takes about 4 shots to kill an enemy tank, which is 8 command points cost, whereas 5 shots from a lance would probably do the same thing. So that is 5 shots, 5 command points, 3 less. Now, if I had only 1 Lancer, that 5 shots would take me 1 command point extra, because I would have to use an engineer to resupply the Lancer to get the other 2 shots out of the Lancer. So I'd have 5 shots to activate the Lancer 5 times, and once to activate the engineer to resupply the Lancer. Now I moved my engineer too close to the mine there. The mine went off and I lost the engineer. Now, as long as I activate a unit and bring on the medic and get the unit evacuated, I can bring him on a later turn. I have to skip at least 1 turn. So I lose 1 full turn's actions for that sniper, or that unit that I want to bring on again and reinforcements. But I could then spend a command point to bring them on. But that's also expensive in command points. So, and sometimes you need to bring the engineer on straight away. Now this is a bit of a waste. I thought I could get around the barrier here, and I couldn't. And then I compounded by the next turn and turning around and putting on, or activating the engineer beside the tank to see if I can get around the barrier. Now I think I partly wanted to activate that engineer because I thought I was too close to the tank and they might get injured by the tank when the tank started maneuvering, especially given the way I drive them. Yes, my tank driving leaves a lot to be desired. I think I've gotten better at it in later games. I think what was my major problem was that I was inclined to steer using the mouse. Or actually, no. What I was inclined to do was to hold the mouse still and steer using the keyboard. But the tank was then trying to also respond to the mouse position relative to a start location or something. I think that's why you just keep wobbling back and forth. I have found it is much, much better to point the mouse and make sure you're pointing the mouse. Move the mouse until the tank is pointing in the direction you want it to do, and then press the W key to drive forward, and not to attempt to use the other keys. Even with the reversing on the S key, for instance, I have discovered that if you don't actually move the mouse around so that it's pointing in the direction you want to reverse in, as soon as you kick the S key, it tries to start turning the tank on its axis towards the mouse. So this is a lot of the cause of my absolutely terrible driving in a lot of these early games. It just took me a while to get the mechanic sorted out, and I suspect it's something that they just never considered, because this starts out as a console game and you move the sticks on the console. Now I don't know, it's a Sega game, it was on the PlayStation, so I presume they had it designed to whatever way the PlayStation, I think you have 2 thumbsticks on the PlayStation, similar to the Xbox. I think all modern consoles with similar kind of basic button or number of buttons and thumbsticks and what have you, but I've never actually used a PlayStation, so I don't take my word on it. And I could be completely wrong. I have no idea. I just know to see them on sort of pictures and stuff like that, but I've never actually owned or used a PlayStation. The other thing I'm constantly inclined to do, and I suppose people who are watching me play World of Tanks are also familiar with, is overextend put units out on their own and then have insufficient support for them to actually hold on to or maintain that position. That said, it is worth your while getting rid of Lancers, especially unsupported Lancers. I don't know why the tank isn't shooting at me, but we'll take it. Because the Lancers are actually quite dangerous. If the enemy activated the Lancers a couple of times and the tank and the Lancers all fired at the Edelweiss, they would remove most of the Edelweiss's hit points. And once they had done that and lose the Edelweiss, you lose the game, so you'd have to start again. In fact, like I said, most of my problems I've had, this is one of the few games I think where I've just sat up straight, or well, aside from the skirmish games, some of the skirmish games are relatively easy. But this is one of the few plot important battles where I've actually gone off and won it first go without any having to reload or retry again because I lost the Edelweiss. Usually it's because I lose the Edelweiss. Though there are a couple of upcoming battles that aren't really battles, they're more puzzles. They're more puzzles. They're a bit like the sort of terrain or geography puzzles you got in the old Tomb Raiders, where you had to jump in a certain spot, launch off a certain spot, and then do a half turn on a bar and flip around and wait for the other thing to spin at 3/4 of a circle and then jump off it and that sort of thing. Except involving guns and tanks and blowing stuff up. You'll see when we get there. And figuring that out took a lot of attempts. A lot of attempts. In fact, one of them I had to essentially go on the net and look to see was there any way of solving this because of the difficulty of it was such that I thought maybe I was getting it wrong. And I was. There was stuff that I completely missed that I was getting wrong, which would have made it a bit easier, but still not so much easier that I don't think I would have gotten the puzzle. But I might have gotten it eventually if I had persisted. But I probably reached the point where I was going to go on the internet anyway and have a look and see what the hell was I doing wrong. So bringing units up and recognising, so I need to bring the Edelweiss up. One of the problems is that because of the earlier battles I became very risk adverse with the Edelweiss, and as I had said earlier, I had too few engineers on the roster, so that if I lost an engineer I would spend a complete turn and maybe 2 turns where I would be unable to bring an engineer to repair the Edelweiss. Because if I lost an engineer right now, and yes, I can't drive through the hedgehogs. Czech hedgehogs is apparently what they were called. I had to look them up. I used to know what they were called, but I had forgotten over the years, and they are completely impenetrable. They're not indestructible. You can actually destroy them by hand grenades. I haven't tried in this scenario, but certainly in some other scenarios they are destructible by throwing hand grenades at them, and then you could drive past them, but you can't destroy them by crushing them under your tank. I presume the tank's mortar round would also destroy them, since it functions pretty much like a hand grenade. So you can see using the Edelweiss chews up action points at a fair rate. Now, I activated this trooper here. I thought that it might be effective to throw a hand grenade at the tank. I think actually throwing a hand grenade at the tank will take out or damage the tracks fairly easily, but it looks like it does no damage at all to the body of the tank. And we've moved Weiss into a position, and now he's been shot at by the tank, and he's been shot at by the stormtrooper, so he's in actually a pretty high risk position. So, what do I do next? Well, I get Ramsey to repair the Edelweiss, because I'm just not taking chances, so I'm going to make sure the Edelweiss is at maximum repair as often as I can make it. So that ends Ramsey's action, that ends the current phase, and it's now the enemy's time to act, and potentially I have a problem here. They're probably not going to move out of their base, but Weiss is in a bit of trouble. He doesn't have a lot of hit points left. And if they had brought the scout around him, or the tank decided to specifically go after him, I think he would have been in serious trouble there. But the tank goes after the Edelweiss, which makes sense, like, so take the Edelweiss out. And you win the battle, and what's happening next? Some more movement to the enemy camp, and it's back down to our phase. So, move the Edelweiss, because it's the only guy down here that can blow up that tank. And try as I might, I can't crush the wire fence. So I can't drive past the tank, which would have been great, because if I could drive past the tank, I could shoot into the radiator. And that shot would probably have finished off the tank. Now I'm going to have to do it the hard way by firing another shot at the tank. So we'll bring Alicia up, and again, under multiple fire, I thought that she'd be able to manage it, but she got the shot off, but didn't take the return hit. And this is where my problem with overexposing units is, because Alicia was a unit that had... losing her loses me to command points, and the loss of the command points is going to be more severe, because I can get Alicia back in the sense that I can easily put a unit up beside her, she'll be medically evacuated out, and she'll return to the roster. I'm not really in any danger of losing her. But the medical roster, the loss of command points is going to hurt, and it's now my phase again. Although I do seem to have gotten extra command points. Not sure why. It does happen. I'm not sure it's because I took out command posts or reached certain objectives or what it is. But there is sometimes you do seem to get more command points. A lot of the time you don't. Anyhow, I've got to decide what to do with it. This shock trooper has got to go. Don't quite manage to kill him. However, the integrity of his position is compromised. We've taken out the sandbag behind him. But the only other spare unit I've got is the engineer. Now, engineers can fight. They're not as effective as scouts. But he's a one-shot kill, so it doesn't matter. The couple of shots I get will be sufficient, however. Because I've used Ramsey to take out the shock trooper, I don't have the spare movement or the spare attack action to repair the Edelweiss, so I'm going to activate Ramsey again. And I get a repair boost, which activates troopers. Some troopers have capacity to get boosts. Something that happens in the course of training. And these boosts can activate, and generally it improves their performance in some aspect of their training. So the repair boost has enabled the Edelweiss to repair back to full in one repair action. I didn't use any orders in this, because again, orders are expensive in terms of command points. And I'm not sure how effective they are. I noticed the Empire uses them quite a bit, but I'm not... something I should probably play around with a bit more is the order system. I tend to kind of forget about them. But anyway, we've managed to occupy a camp, which is very useful, because now we can get in reinforcements in these locations rather than going all the way back to our start point. So because I've occupied a camp, I reckon like Hans is like 4 moves away from the starting, or from the action at the moment. So if I was going to make use of him, it'd be actually quicker to take him off map, skip the next turn and bring him on map, and take the 3 command points to do it, or probably 4 or 5 points to do it, because depending on where I brought him on, it's okay to bring him on here, because this place is right at the action, or at the limit of my advance at the moment. But I've already bypassed the other. I'm probably already at least 2 movements away from the other command post. 3 movements away, 3 to 4 movements away if I was using shock troopers. So when you're bringing on units from the reserves, you're really only limited by who's available and command points you got. Now, not everyone is suitable to bring over, so sometimes it's worth looking through their stats to see what it is. Because, like, for instance, they might be... have a pollen allergy or something like that, which would eliminate them for this map, because it's all wilderness and grass and stuff like that, and the next thing they see the grass, and it reduces their performance. Whereas they might be meadow lovers or something like that, and if they see the grass, they go, wow, and their performance would actually get boosted. That sort of thing is a consideration. The other thing is you can't bring on anyone who's obviously already deployed, or currently on the map. you can only bring people on who are actually back at the reserve. But I think in theory, you could cycle through all available reserves. Now, obviously, you have to have gaps in your roster. You can't exceed the roster that you started out with. So I think we started out with whatever it was, 9 troopers. So we can't have any more than 9 out of the whole squad. But we could, in theory, bring them all on. I don't think one would ever likely to be do it because it's again it's fairly expensive in command points because the command point to bring them on, but they're not available for the next turn. And if your your headquarters place that you're bringing them on is too far away, then it's not necessarily an effective use of the command points. Now, I do think I needed them at this point in time, because I had lost some people and I needed to bring up some reinforcements. I decided that I needed shock troopers at this side, so I brought on some shock troopers, but I didn't bring on anybody else, and I didn't bring on an engineer, for instance, to clear out the remaining mines, because I just felt it wasn't worth it. I think I had scouts available and I could have brought scouts on, but I think the main reason I brought on shock troopers was that I felt that the actual camp seemed to have enough enemy activity in it that scouts might not be sufficient to take the camp. And therefore I needed the shock troopers, I needed the capability of the shock troopers to take the camp, and therefore it was worth spending the command points and taking the extra turns to allow the number of shock troopers that I needed to be brought to bear. Now, hindsight, that might not have been necessary or the best approach that I took, and Sherry's had an unfortunate moment here because the man's completely ducked her fire, and he has not been affected by he's completely ducked her fire, and she has been constantly hit several times by his fire, and therefore she just can't keep standing and she's out of the combat. I should also have brought Rosie a little bit further forward round so that she had a clear target and he wasn't hidden behind the tree. I was giving him too much of an advantage there, and I think I probably might have been able to kill him without using the extra command point. It does allow me to evacuate Cherry, but yeah, I'm not sure if it was a worthwhile trade-off. I think if I'd gone around the tree properly the first time and just headshot him, that might have done what I needed to do without taking the extra wounds on Rosie. I think I was saying earlier too about the Edelweiss that I was became very risk averse with the Edelweiss, and probably too much so. Sometimes you just have to bring the Edelweiss forward because it's the only way to provide cover for your advancing infantry. Just like in a real war, you use the tank. The enemy anti-tank fire won't necessarily, or if you suppress the enemy anti-tank fire, they won't necessarily be able to take out the tank. You just push it into a forward location, march a couple of shock troopers up behind us, they can keep up no problem, and then use the shock troopers to storm the enemy strong point when the tank gets close enough that the shock troopers don't have to stand in the open and exchanging fire with a ton of enemy soldiers with no cover. Instead, you can bring them around the enemy positions so that they can expose themselves to a limited number of enemies, use the tank as cover from the majority of the enemy defenders, expose themselves to one ideally, or two if you have to, and take those people out with concentrated or focused fire, and then do the same thing for each of the other enemy units so that you can get them all eventually. Largo arriving at the gate has triggered the dialogue of General Jaeger arriving, and he's now ordered the evacuation of the camp. Some more enemy troops appear, but it doesn't really... the enemy are not taking any kind of aggressive action or anything like that, but they are all kind of facing and focused towards the attack on the north, and this is the place that I'm going to have to reinforce. I'm going to get these shock troopers into position to do something useful. Now, this guy manages to get a few hits. It's very long range. As you can see, the arrow over the enemy trooper is amber, yellow to amber, and therefore he's not going to be seriously injured, and neither is my guy. But this Jane has now come up, and the thing is, Jane has the gate between him and the enemy shock trooper or scout or whatever it is, and therefore I can't get a shot off. Back around to the to my turn, and here I do the same mistake again. Rosie takes out the scout, but I overextend Rosie. I bring her around into a forward location and leave her there, thinking that, she'd be safe enough with the sandbags, and don't give her enough support, as it turns out. I don't have the command points to actually give her the support, and I didn't continue to focus on her position. Instead, I switched my attention to taking out this Lieutenant Nonnenkopf, who has been very tough and very resilient so far, and has taken quite a bit of firepower to take him down. Now, Lieutenant Nonnenkopf has gotten effective return fire onto Weiss, and he's managed to evade Weiss's entire second attack and left Weiss on pretty low, very low health points. So I bring up Dallas, and this is again where I'm probably better off I'd moved up the Edelweiss first. But I thought I'd get Dallas in here without minimal exposure, and that he therefore would be able to heal up Weiss without taking too much risk for himself. But unfortunately, he was in the line of fire, and Lieutenant Nonnenkopf, whatever his name is, could see him, and therefore take him out, and I lose another character. So we bring the Edelweiss to bear, and I'm afraid I don't have an engineer available, so I'm going to have to go and risk it with the anti-tank mines and just take the hits. And we brought him up. We have done a fair bit of damage. We haven't quite killed him. Unfortunately, it's the end of our round, and we have a person down. Fortunately, the person is down behind our line, so to speak. Therefore, it's unlikely somebody will walk up to them and eliminate them. The tank pushes forward, but then surprisingly goes around and shoots Rosie with machine gun fire. But takes her down a few hit points, and obviously makes her more vulnerable to any subsequent attacks. Then pulls back with the tank, and I think probably burns up another 2 action points to maneuver the tank some more, and takes down Rosie completely with a round from the tank's main gun. And we're now awaiting the enemy actions, most of which remains hidden except for the damage they've already done. Weiss is getting another pounding. And he misses with his return fire. Lieutenant Nonnenkopf is a pretty tough customer. So we have not a lot of combat or command points to deal with. That looks like that surge that we got there was a kind of a one-off turn, where we were able to focus the command for a short period of time, and we don't have the same amount of points back anymore. But we've taken out Lieutenant Nonnenkopf. And now that we've got the Edelweiss into the town proper, we have the possibility of taking cover in the town and actually supporting the tank with engineers. And also, I think from where I am, I'm safe enough from that anti-tank gun on the hill that one of the things I don't want to advance too far into the town is that I don't want to give the enemy tank and lancers and the anti-tank gun all of them a position to shoot at me. Into my current action. Need to activate further troops. Don't have a lot of action points yet, so I'm not going to go for the Edelweiss. I want to rescue Alicia as well, because Alicia's actually at risk of being permanently taken out. Or Rosie's at risk of being permanently taken out. And I do have an opportunity to shoot somebody here. Managed to get rid of that guy, and I can put Jane down into cover, and then I can bring up the next trooper that I want to bring up, and I'm going to bring up Alex because I want to give support to Jane, to the 2 shock troopers that I have in the town, to give themselves the maximum chance of surviving the enemy counter assault. We can see here the shock trooper fires back, and I have 1 action point left, so I'm going to use it to do what? To activate Alex again. Now this time I'm activating Alex. He fires a grenade, because I want to remove the cover from the sniper if I can't remove everything else from him. So the grenade does its job, and it ends the phase, and I have to endure enemy activity for another round. Enemies push up in their great big tank, and they fire point blank range at the Edelweiss and do a fair amount of damage. And then they fire again and they do a lot of damage. The Edelweiss is now a one-shot kill. Somebody puts Jane under fire. We take out the shock trooper with the return fire, and what's happening now? Don't know. We've used 2 action points, but it's our phase. We're nearly there. We need to do some repairs. The Edelweiss is in serious trouble. If it goes another round, I'm dead. Bring on the medic. I think Ramsey can make it up as far as the Edelweiss anyway. So Dallas has been evacuated, and we're now closing in on the Edelweiss. But we've gone a little too far, and we're out of range of the engineers. So now, once again, we need to repair the tank, and do we get a boost this time? No, we don't. The boost doesn't activate, so the tank isn't fully healed. So now we need to deal with that enemy tank. So we're going to bring up Largo. And he's going to take a shot at the enemy tank. Doesn't do a whole lot of damage to it. And that's it. I don't think I can do any more. Well, I could, but I don't want to risk doing a whole lot more. But I want to take Largo around to the back of the tank so that I can activate him and shoot the back of the tank right into the radiator glowy bit. And that completely removes the hit points of the Lupus. So the enemy tank is now out of action, and that triggers the final dialogue. So General Jaeger is informed that the base is finished evacuating, which is very convenient now that his tank is dead. And he decides that he's going to evacuate the base. The enemy are abandoning the base, and there's essentially going to be no more enemy troops at the end. So we activate Largo, I think, and we get him to move in and just take over the flag. Occupy the base, put the Galleon flag up in the enemy camp, and that ends the operation for us. So that is the operation complete, and we've basically won this side of the battle. So thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the playthrough so far. If you did, give us a like. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the channel. I will catch you all again soon. Bye for now.